I have my 1-inch strip of fabric cut, ready for my flange, sewn together and ironed lengthwise for the whole length at wrong sides together. Okay, I have my flange all ready to go. My quilt has been prepared. I've got the zigzag on the edges, and I'm going to line up my flange very carefully with the edge of the quilt. There is my 1/4 inch mark, but I'm going to sew slightly less than a 1/4 inch seam so that when I put on the binding, which will be sewn at a 1/4 inch, none of this stitching is going to show. So I'm going to just sew this all the way down to 1 inch before the end of this row. And I put a mark there just so I know when to stop. And there's no need to knot or backstitch because this is all going to be over sewn with the binding. So I'm now going to trim the flange to the edge of my quilt to get ready to put the next piece of the flange on. And this is not sewn down so that I can put this underneath it and it'll be continuously sewn down. I'm ready to put the next piece of the flange in, so I can just use a bit of glue to hold the next piece in place to make it easier to control, and another dab on here to put this piece back down. And now I'm going to finish sewing the seam from the other side, and again it's less than a 1/4 inch. And now I'm going to turn and continue with the flange on this side. And again, I'm going to stop about 1 inch before the end so I can get ready to put the next piece of the flange on. When you're putting on your binding, you never start at the end of either corner of the quilt, and you also end up leaving quite a long tail before you start sewing. It looks kind of odd on here because my sample is so small, but usually you will leave about a good 6 inches of the tail before you start sewing. However, if you're working with the flange at the same time, the flange still has to be started at the corner. You're not going to have it cut the way you do with the binding. So I'm still going to, I've got my flap from the previous corner waiting for this one. So to keep the flange all in place, I'm going to put some glue down there to hold this in place while I start sewing my binding where I need to, and I can also use some clips to hold it in place so that's more secure. And now I'm going to put some more glue all the way down just so I can get started with the binding. So this is going to be held in place temporarily, and now I can get my binding ready, and I'm going to get this lined up. Now this seam is going to be the proper 1/4 inch, and I usually start about 8 or 10 inches from the final end, but obviously that doesn't apply here. And here I will do a few back stitches just to keep that in place, and I'm going to carry on stitching at 1/4 inch. And doing the binding, you stop 1/4 inch before the edge of the quilt, back stitch, and I'm getting ready to turn the corner with the binding, but in the meantime I'm going to cut my flange so I can continue with doing the corner of the binding, and this will also have to be tucked under there. Because there's a 1/4 inch there, there's room for you to tuck this underneath, or just put it just as far as you can against that seam, and that is going to be stitched down in any event, so you don't have to worry about it not going all the way up to the corner of that quilt.